So let's get started, everyone. Welcome. My name is Mary Eleanor Power, and I am the Director of Marketing and Communications for Dalhousie University's Faculty of Open Learning and Career Development. I'm really happy to see so many of you here today for a webinar focused on equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility. I will begin by acknowledging that Dalhousie University is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. We are all treaty people. And I'd like to begin by welcoming our host today, Rebecca Skeet, and I'll share a little bit about Rebecca. Rebecca is the director of 8 YMCA Nova Scotia Works locations in Halifax, Dartmouth, and surrounding areas. She has worked in the employment field for over 21 years for both the federal and provincial government. And in 2000, Rebecca was part of a YMCA initiative in which a number of people were training by the Human Rights Commission to deliver diversity workshops. Rebecca is very passionate when it comes to diversity and inclusion. She facilitates workshops for staff, other organizations, and a variety of boards. She developed an equitable hiring program along with relevant tools for the YMCA, and these have been used by other organizations. Rebecca holds a master's degree in social work, and in addition to being a private practice social worker, she is also a certified career development practitioner in Nova Scotia. Thanks so much for joining us, Rebecca, and I will pass it over to you. And if anyone has any questions, include them in the chat and we will address them at the end. Thanks so much.
Okay, I'm going to start by sharing the screen. Everybody can see this okay?
Yes, we can. Great.
Great. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go through a couple of slides and we'll have a bit of a conversation about equity, diversity, and inclusion. And then it'll probably take about 15, 20 minutes, and then we're going to leave a couple of minutes at the end for some questions. So I will get started. So welcome, everybody. That was the bio. You already had that piece, which was great. So in terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion, there's several buzzwords that are happening lately. Like we hear about it almost in every conversation, every meeting we go to, we hear about various equity, diversity, and inclusion reasons or programs. And there's several different reasons why people want to look at different strategies or implementing different programs. So as you can see from just this piece here, there's things from higher employee engagement, better company reputation, increased profits, faster problem solving. And these are just 10 of the benefits, but there's several other benefits that that come from equity, diversity, and inclusive practices. But what seems to be one of the biggest challenges is that several people or organizations struggle when it actually comes time to implement the initiatives. So there could be training opportunities with, local training, and, there could be several different committees, and there could be different hiring practices, but sometimes the expected results, it's hard to get the expected results in terms of some of the plans. So people actually struggle with some of those pieces, and sometimes some of the plans can actually have the reverse effect. So just a quick question, you guys can give a thumbs up. I just kind of want to have an idea of how many people that are on the call today actually enjoy having uncomfortable conversations. So like, did anybody wake up today and say, you know what, I'm going to have an uncomfortable conversation today, and we're really excited about it. So did anybody wake up having that thought? I can't actually see the thumbs. And if anybody did put a thumbs up, I'm guessing it would probably be a fairly small amount of people, because nobody really enjoys having uncomfortable conversations. And when you're thinking about topics such as diversity, equity, and inclusion, a lot of times it can be quite uncomfortable. So one of the challenges with some of these programs is that oftentimes there may be programs that may roll out, and we may be potentially hitting the target but missing the points. So again, it kind of goes back to some of the EDI plans may not necessarily yield the expected results. Sometimes it can actually provide negative results. So what are we missing, and how do we actually implement successful plans? So some of the reasons, again, for EDI programs, social accountability, so it looks good to the public. There's the business case for EDI programs. So as many of you are probably familiar with, we're currently experiencing a labor shortage, and this has been happening now for probably close to 10 years. Some industries feel it more than others. So there are various different business cases for EDI programs. So labor shortages, also trying to attract different customers. There's also ethical considerations. So, it is like the right thing to do. Also, there could be, lack of diverse representation. So, there may be organizations that maybe hire diverse candidates, but have a hard time retaining them. So when looking at programs, sometimes it's good to kind of look at what has been done in the past. So, develop EDI policies and practices. So are the policies and practices measurable? So if you have a policy, is there a way to actually measure the results? Creating EDI committees. So does the committee actually have the power to make changes and to make recommendations? That's quite important in terms of that process as well. Workplace training. So did the training actually lead to positive outcomes, or did it have a negative impact? So sometimes when people engage in training, you may see benefits for a couple of days, and then there may not necessarily be evidence that training actually impacted service on a daily basis. So if oftentimes when there is training, how do you make sure that the training is, relevant, and it actually impacts or makes changes that you'd want to see made within the organization? Targeted hiring practices. So, sometimes people will implement specific targeted hiring practices to hire diverse candidates, but then they may have a difficult time retaining individuals. So they might be able to get people on board, and then retention becomes an issue. Also, if you're looking at some of the different EDI interventions, so what are the actual plans with the EDI intervention? And again, are they realistic and are they attainable? Sometimes EDI programs may take a little bit longer to implement, depending on what it is, what the goals are. So interventions that are part of, or action items that are part of a plan, they need to be measurable with realistic and attainable outcomes. And another piece, employee engagement. Are their staff engaged, or are they withdrawn? So in terms of some of the previous examples, there's not actually like a right or wrong answer. There may be people that may have tried some different pieces. Maybe they were successful. Maybe there were some other challenges. And that doesn't mean that those examples there, if there were some challenges previously, there could be, some tweaks that could potentially be made to have the expected outcomes, or to achieve the expected outcomes. So one of the other things that's really important is, in terms of EDI programs, who actually owns that agenda? So whose agenda is it? Sometimes if it's an organization, it could be the president of an organization, it could be the board of an organization. Sometimes there might be staff that take different programs, and they may be trying to make changes, but they don't necessarily have the power or the authority to implement some programs. So whose agenda is it, and how do you actually get buy-in from others? So also in terms of EDI programs, being here, that's actually a great start, because, again, when you think about having uncomfortable conversations, EDI discussions are not comfortable in many cases. And sometimes it's kind of a courageous conversation, because, when you know that you're going to engage in conversation, it almost puts you in a situation where you're a little bit more vulnerable to admit what you don't know, or just open to learning. So, and it's really important to work through that discomfort, because it's that discomfort that leads to growth and development, right? If you don't have that growth and development, if you're responding superficially, then you're going to have superficial results. So if you really want to see change, then sometimes, oftentimes it starts with you, right? So EDI plans, they need to have buy-in from senior leaders and staff. But again, you need to start with you. The process actually starts with each individual. So it's the process of embarking on an individual journey that helps you to develop and implement a successful EDI program. So today we were talking a bit about the certificate in equity, diversity, and inclusion that's offered at Dalhousie, Faculty of Open Learning and Career Development. So the certificate program, it actually has 4 courses in order to earn the certificate, and each course consists of 3 weekly modules, and they're offered throughout the year, and each course builds on the previous course, and upon completion you'll have the framework to build a successful EDI program that will and you'll be equipped to kind of move from theory to successful implementation. So the first course and actually this course just started last week, Understanding EDI and Organization Imperative. So this course kind of takes a deep dive into the subject of diversity and inclusion. Participants will be they're provided with, like I said, increased understanding and confidence in engaging in conversations. There's also a process of kind of self-reflecting and kind of looking inwards to kind of see, you know, that whole part where I talked about it starts with you. This course kind of focuses a lot on that as well. So it's that one just started last week. And then course 2, so inclusive communication for the workplace. So this focuses on the art of communication. So participants will identify barriers to effective inclusive communications, exploring how to bridge differences and support organizational goals for advancing diversity and inclusion. The third course is optimizing diverse team performance. So participants, again, will foster a deeper understanding of the way they can optimize diverse team contributions to organizational success. Team relationships are at the center of organizational success. Research and evidence demonstrates that diverse teams lead to increased performance and higher profitability. To build a culture that fosters diversity, organizations must do the work to maximize on the benefits of the diversity of their team. So this actual description has been modified for the presentation. So all of the course descriptions that are up, there's more details on the website. And the final course is, you know, strategies for implementing the your program. So it focuses on provides you with a framework to build a diversity inclusion strategy from start to finish. This is important as changing demographics, talent shortages, equity disparities, and a variety of economic challenges have underscored equity, diversity, and inclusion as businesses and service imperatives. So this final course actually helps organizations, organizational leaders, staff develop an actual framework and then take that framework and actually apply it to the workplace. So oftentimes when you think about some of the training programs on there, there may be lots of great tools and resources, but some of those steps that are required to kind of implement an effective strategy may not necessarily, it may be lacking. And for more information, you can visit the website to find out more about the actual course, or you can send an email to openlearning@dal.ca. So I think for me, that was a little bit quicker than what I thought. So I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen just to see if you had any questions that popped up.
That's
in the
great.
Chat.
Thank you, Rebecca. And feel free to type in any questions in the chat if you have them. I did include some links to all of the individual courses, the 4 courses, in the chat. So feel free to check those out. And it goes without saying that you certainly don't, but I will it bears repeating that if you would prefer to just take 1 or 2 courses, you certainly can. There's no expectation to complete the full certificate, although you know, that would be ideal in terms of earning that and adding that to your resume. And now I'll just open it up if anyone has any questions. Bronwyn, I see that you have your hand up, and I'm just curious if you wish to speak. If you have a question, you can feel free to just let me know in the chat. Oh, you put down your hand. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and there is a question in the chat.
Yes, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the question is the course available for working professionals and is offered in flexible times? So the course is offered online, and it's a combination of synchronous and asynchronous material. So there's like readings and videos, and then there's live sessions that are often in the evening that are held once a week for each course. So each course, if it's a 3-week module, each week there'll be an evening course. And those courses, the live sessions are also recorded. So if for some reason somebody can't attend the live session, then they can still participate or watch and catch up. Great.
Thank you. There's a question here from Indranil on the, and I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. My apologies if I haven't. Just in the Q&A section here, And I'm happy to answer it. Would the courses be eligible for employee tuition waiver at DAL? So for anyone who's joining who is employed by the university, I'll answer this by saying that so HR within the university, they do have tuition waiver program, as well as courses that are eligible for tuition reimbursement. And so these courses are not available for tuition waiver. However, there is an application process. I would suggest reaching out to HR@dal.ca. There is an application where if you can demonstrate the direct link to how the courses can benefit your role, then it's possible that you could receive tuition reimbursement for completing those courses. So my best suggestion would be to reach out to HR directly to get that application form and see if you're eligible to get that reimbursement. The link for tuition fees. So Nina, I believe you're referring to, the cost by email. So Bronwyn and Nina, I would direct you to the individual links that I shared in the earlier in the chat. That has the cost for all of the individual courses, and they are $650 each. So just sharing that verbally. Kadra has asked, can I still enroll the course that started last week? I don't believe so, Kadra, but Rebecca, maybe you want to jump in here.
Yeah, I know that Dawn's on the call. So so far, the course opened up on Friday, and the first live session's tonight at 7. So Dawn, maybe you can, she just texted, so unfortunately not. So what they would have probably done, they probably would have done quite a bit of work between now, like Friday and now, in terms of the reading and the preparation that they would do for the live session. And in terms of, there was another question there in terms of sorry, I'm just going to try to scroll back up just so we don't miss it. Is the course, does the training include diverse religious and spiritual identities? So in terms of diversity and inclusion, we look at all areas. So we look at religions, we look at ability, we look at gender identity, racism. We look at everything, and also there's that whole intersectionality of pieces too, right? So a lot of times when you're looking at diversity, it doesn't just happen in boxes, right? So there's different things that kind of overlap. So one of the biggest things that I think also is that when we start working on ourselves and we're able to develop that rapport with individuals, and we actually can start to appreciate who they are and all the different I guess values that they may have because a lot of times when you think about values, that's something that sometimes I like to do in one of the other courses that I'm involved in is we kind of do a values-based activity. And what happens is a lot of times some of the values that some individuals have, they're quite similar. Like a lot of times people will have shared similar values, and that actually happens with a lot of organizations too. Some of the personal values that folks have align with some of the organizational values where they work. And that's oftentimes where they find themselves like more content. And sometimes when you think about that, we might have a diversity of individuals in that organization. And if they don't have that rapport, or if they don't actually have meaningful conversations, they don't realize like how some of the values are quite similar. I mean, it may not be like similar in terms of like, each component, but family could be really important for folks, or there might be other things like that are actually quite similar, but you don't realize that if we don't take the time to actually have conversations and get to know people, right?
Absolutely. Becky's asked a great question, and I may just ask that Dawn elaborate on this, but she's asked, do you need to take the courses in a certain order? So it is recommended that you take them in the order of as I have listed them. So the first course would be that Understanding EDI, and the next offering would begin in September. And Dawn, I know the second course begins the beginning of March, which is the Inclusive Communications in the Workplace course. And just curious, Dawn, if you could either confirm or deny that folks could take that second course in March if they wish, or if we really need to make sure that people begin with that first course. Okay, so Dawn's indicate. So Dawn is our program manager, and it's great to have her join us in the webinar as well. And so I'll just direct everyone to, or not direct you to, but we'll just reshare the link to the second course in the certificate, which is Inclusive Communications in the Workplace. And I will add it in the chat here. And so that course begins in March, on March 4th. So if you're interested, you could certainly look into enrolling in that course. Otherwise, the first course in the certificate is Understanding EDI, and the next offering is begins September 9th. And as I mentioned before, for those who may have missed it, each course is 3 weeks, as Rebecca mentioned, and with some asynchronous sessions, or sorry, with some synchronous sessions. And what that means is those are live sessions that recommended you attend. So they are instructor led. And really that's in some ways, some of the most valuable experience that you get from the course is having that one-on-one interaction with your peers, with fellow learners, and with the instructor.
Yeah, I find that the live sessions are really, I find them really good, because I find like you get to learn from your peers. There's meaningful conversations. A lot of times, if there's group work, there's a space there where individuals can pair up and do the group work. It's probably, yeah, that would probably be my favorite part of all the courses, would be the live sessions.
And David has just asked, can you please confirm that you can take the March course without the first one? And I'm indicating that yes, you can. I haven't heard anything otherwise. It is recommended that you take them in order, but there's no kind of prerequisite, no formal prerequisite, I should say. Are there any other questions that we can answer? This is great dialogue. I'm glad that there's so much interest. Any questions about anything that the courses may cover? Okay, thanks very much, John, for confirming. Can a summary of course 1 be provided? Are you able to reshare your screen, Rebecca, by chance, and perhaps show what that first course just on the screen?
Oh, and move everybody over. Current, where are we at? We're at the, oops, I gotta get back, sorry. Just going to move me over. So this is just like a couple of lines about the course, and there's probably a little bit more on the website. But again, a lot of it is kind of looking at yourself and doing some reflective pieces, which is actually quite important. And then there's some activities that you would also do with peers. There's some great videos and reading discussion points also, along with the live sessions. And yeah, I guess, when you think about diversity and inclusion, or even trying to implement any type of program, the first thing is you actually have to be comfortable having those conversations, right? So and then also being mindful when you're in those places, it is something that has to happen, that you do all the time. It's something that you have to be conscious of all the time. So having that level of comfort when you're having the conversations, or even being comfortable with discomfort, I guess, it's really important. And I think when you increase awareness around that, and you're able to kind of enter in conversations where all parties are somewhat vulnerable, it can lead to really impactful strategies and solutions. And actually, it also helps to strengthen some of those relationships, right? And it can also help people move from, tolerance to actual acceptance, right? And respectful interactions.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Rebecca, for that. Sorry. Does the course content, David's asking, does the course content address the practical challenges of implementing EDIA programs, or is it mostly theory? It's a great question. Rebecca, could you?
So in the first one, course one, I guess course one sets the foundation to be able to jump into that. But I think in terms of all the different modules, it does actually look at the different challenges and what you have to actually do to, I guess, overcome some of those hurdles. There would be ethics involved. I can't remember right off if there's legalities, because there's actually another instructor that is, I think right now I believe that they're doing course 3 and they're and some pieces with course 4. So I feel like, I mean, in terms of legalities, that's a human rights piece. So that piece would definitely be something that would kind of be woven through all the courses, because so there's not just that whole, I mean, there's those characteristics that are protected by the human rights, but then there's also other pieces too, and that intersectionality. And then even for characteristics that maybe aren't listed under human rights, there's still some legalities around that as well, because, any types of forms of, discrimination or harassment, like it's not acceptable, right? But I also find, like, sometimes when there's different policies out there or procedures, oftentimes, depending on the language, if it's not written in a way with kind of really clear expectations, then they can be left open to interpretation. So if someone sometimes brings forward some sort of an issue, it may not always adequately be addressed. So then sometimes people won't bother, right? They don't bother. They may disengage. And they might find other outlets to talk about it. They might talk about it with their families or talk about it with their friends, but they have to really kind of trust the system. So, one of the biggest pitfalls, I guess, of not implementing programs adequately could potentially be the legalities, right? So it could be a human rights complaint, could be lawsuits, could be employment pieces as well, right? Like have employment lawyers involved. So, those things I think are really important. But I also think, like, when you're setting those pieces up, having, like, the folks that are doing that awareness piece really has to be there. And it can't just be done with one lens, right? There has to be multiple lens and multiple, I guess, input and multiple feeders into that, right? Because one of the things that when you're looking at different programs, or when you're developing anything or practices, is you always want to look at who's missing, right? So who is missing from the discussion? Sometimes things can be written and developed, and there could be entire groups of individuals that are potentially left out, and then the practices could actually create more of a burden for those individuals and actually be, it might have been intended to be inclusive, and it could have potentially excluded groups of individuals, right?
And I think, yeah, and that was a great explanation, Rebecca. And not to take away from how you've described it, but just to kind of reemphasize, I think, the value of these 4 courses, and certainly recommended that you take them in sequence. But if not, really the intention is that you come away with a usable framework that you can apply to your own situation. And I'm sure that there, as I've heard from other learners who've taken other courses, there are certainly applications you can take into your work from what you're learning in these courses, but also in other parts of your life. I mean, some of these principles aren't just directly applicable to our work lives, but to our everyday lives. So there's a great deal of value from a practical standpoint on a number of fronts. And Dawn has very kindly just reminded all of us. So on the website, and I'm going to include a link to the certificate. I did include a link to all of the individual courses that make up the certificate. And But the link to the overall certificate, the certificate in equity, diversity, and inclusion, can be found here on this link that I've shared in the chat. And there have been a lot of fantastic questions. We're just 1 minute over our time. This is meant to be kind of a short snapper webinar for you to enjoy over your lunch or your morning coffee, wherever you're joining us from, or your mid-morning snack. But keep an eye out for an email later today with a link to the certificate. Again, there you will find more details on the learning outcomes of each individual course, the cost, the time of the live session. So all of the details that you need will be there. And we'll also include an email address, which is openlearning@dal.ca. And by emailing that address, you will reach our student services team, and they would be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. So we will leave it there for now. Thank you so much, everyone, for your participation, your questions, your enthusiasm. Thank you, Rebecca, for leading us through the past 30 minutes. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day and week, and take very good care and stay safe.
Thank you.
All right.
For the rest of your day, everybody. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.